Alrighty, let's go ahead and get right down to business here. This is a tier list video because I guess people still make those. So we're going to be looking at each of the new transfer students' abilities. If you don't know, transfer student has a different effect depending on what board it is on. They actually made each effect pretty strong individually, in general, probably to make it potentially a viable card. It's definitely a fun card. I don't know how reliable it's going to be. Well, necessarily it's not, but anyway, let's start sorting these into tiers. So first we have our the Horde one, Ogrimmar. If you're on the Ogrimmar board, this one here, you are going to get a pretty strong effect. It's just deal 2 damage. Very simple. Basically a 3-drop, right? Stranglethorn. Poisonous and stealth, literally a 3-drop. That was from Ungoro. That is a that was a beast. So depending on who you are, if you are a Silverback Patriarch backer, then you might think that that's more of just a good 2-drop, but that's pretty effective. Next we have Stormwind, which is Divine Shield. That just, I was kind of caught between good 2-drop and average 2-drop for this because it's shielded minibot without the mech synergy. So I think not having the mech synergy actually drops it down a little bit. Pandaria. Give a friendly minion +1/+2. That is necessarily better than the Shattered Sun Cleric, which was a 2/1 that gave +1/+1, so you're getting 2 extra stats in total here, which I'm inclined to put as a good 2-drop. And then we're actually going to separate wild from standard because it's sort of a relative rating too. So we're going to do the we're going to skip everything up through Rastakhan, and now we're going to do Rise of Shadows through Outland, and we'll talk about the Scholomance one separately. All right, so Rise of Shadows is this one that is at a lackey to your hand. That is a good 2-drop. Remember, there is a Death Rattle, a class card that is Death Rattle at a lackey to your hand, and that's a good card. So Battlecry got to be better. And the reason it's not basically a 3-drop is because there is a 3-drop Battlecry at a lackey, and it's got better stats and it gives you armor. Then again, it is a class card, so maybe it is basically a 3-drop because it's neutral. I don't know. That's debatable. You can talk about that in the comments. Tell me what you think about that. The Gamer Feet Uldum board is Just Reborn. That is an average 2-drop. Same deal with this. This is just shielded minibot. This is just shotbot, except no mech synergy. Alright, next up we have the other Uldum board, the one with the windmill. Add a random Uldum plague spell to your hand. So, by drawing from a fairly limited pool, I suspect that this is better than most, like, generate a random spell cards. I don't know. And then I consider the average power level of the plagues, and generally speaking, if you're running a particular plague, it's built around your deck archetype. So kind of makes it a little weaker that you're not able to. They're all kind of like board clear effects, basically, right? But you're kind of not really in control of anything there, so I'm inclined to put it in the average tier. Maybe good, but because the general power level is a little high, right? No, I'll leave it down here. Okay, next up we have the Descent of Dragons board. Discover a Dragon. Good 2-drop. Think about all those Explorer dragons that we have. Let's take Hunters. It's a Poisonous 2/3 for 3. It doesn't have a keyword like Poisonous, but it's the same effect, and it's a 2/2 for 2. So, those are good 3-drops. This is a good 2-drop. I think that's fair to say. The Outland, dormant for 2 turns. When it awakens, deal 3 damage to 2 random enemy minions. Dormant is a little hard to rate. I find that, generally speaking, the earlier a dormant card comes out, the better. The best thing we can compare this to, I think, is... actually, I think it's comparable to the 3 I'm going to put it right there. The 3 dormant cards that are in that mana range: Ganarg, Vile Fiend, and the face charging one, right? So it's the face charging one. We'll call it that because let's be honest, it always goes face. Is 5 damage to just like a random thing, and it eats its own health, but it's a 5/4, right? So it's like better statted, so it kind of balances out there. The Ganarg is a 2/2, just like this, and it gives you 3 attack in the form of a weapon. And over the course of 2 turns, you can bop 2 guys in exchange for your health, and that only costs 1 mana. Vile Fiend, same thing. It's a 3/5. Realistically, it's going to probably trade pretty fairly into 2 guys. So, this is a fine 2-drop effect. I don't think it's anything crazy. I think it's a little above average. All right, now we can move on to the wild decks, or the wild boards here. So we'll start with Naxxramas. Death Rattle. Add a random Death Rattle minion to your hand. That is very normal. That is, I don't think you could have come up with a more Naxxramas-y design, both in the sense that it is a Death Rattle card and in the sense that it has been power crept, because that's not that strong. All right, Gnomes versus Goblins. Oh, our first bad one. Here we go. So I'd like to point out all the standard ones are really good. This is bad. You spare parts. Back in the day, I mean, this is like before my time, before I paid attention to the meta, Antonidas Mage would run Toshli for the spare parts. That's the most used spare parts I've seen. This is not worth it. So you are like they're weak innately. And I think they're cool design. I think maybe we'll talk about generated cards later in a different video, but I think they're a fun design, and maybe that's what generated cards should be. Similar to the toxins from that one rogue legendary, but I digress. Blackrock Mountain. At the end of your turn, reduce the cost of a random card in your hand by 2. Little Thorzen effect there. Reduce the cost of a card in your hand by 2. So I'd say that is a good 2-drop, maybe basically a 3-drop. But I'm gonna put it here for now. And remember, these are not ordered within the tier. This doesn't mean anything. I'm not rating them relative to each other within a tier, but I think that generally speaking, if you're trying to reduce the cost of a card in your hand, it's for the purpose of combo, or like you have something. It's intentional, right? Since you can't rely on this, like I'd put that at basically a 3-drop tier if you could reliably get this, but you don't, and that's something to keep in mind with all of these. The Grand Tournament. Look, Inspire was a dud of an effect. Inspire, draw a card. Come on, it's bad. It's just way too slow. You're gonna turn 4, drop this and hero power. I don't think so. There's an argument to be made that it's good in the late game, but I just don't think this is the reload you need. Also, if you're not building around this. You're not building around the 1 in 25 of landing on the Grand Tournament map just so you can get some extra reload in your deck. Alright, next up we have the Excavation League of Explorers. Add a random weapon to your hand. That is a pretty normal 2-drop. Random weapon, there are some real bad weapons out there. I think you could compare this to Stolen Steel, which is discover a weapon at least, but, no body. So, Stolen Steel is really bad, though. This is only slightly better because at least you're getting a 2/2, right? Alright, I'd say that's about an average 2-drop. Maybe a little below, but it's not quite garbage. Next up, discover a new basic hero power. This might be a hot take, but I think this is really bad. Because, again, you put Finley in your deck because you were building around that. You're like Murloc Shaman, and you're trying to get a really aggressive hero power. No, you don't. you don't want this effect just for fun. Most of the time you want to keep your hero power. So this is probably mostly a detriment. Because again, and I can't emphasize this enough, because this is the flaw with literally all of these effects that might otherwise be okay. You are not building around any one effect, which is why I expected the average power level of these cards to be higher. And it's almost a bell curve here right now. But I think it evens out a little more later. We'll get into that. So, Old Gods. Spend all your mana, summon a minion of that cost. Necessarily, this is at least a good 2-drop, right? Because on 2 mana, because remember you have to subtract 2 out. So on 2 mana you play it, and then it summons a 1/1. That's a good 2-drop. You get 3/3 for 2. On 2, or on 3, you're potentially getting a 2/2 and a 2/1, or a 2/2 and a 2/2 potentially. Which again, still good. You know, it gets wonkier as you get out on the curve, but early game, or if you manipulate it so that you're just summoning a wisp, it's fine. It's a good 2-drop. It's definitely better than average. I don't think it's anything amazing though. Then after Old Gods we have Karazhan. Add a random Karazhan portal spell to your hand. All of the Karazhan portal spells are really good, except for the Ironforge portal, which is okay. Generally speaking, this is going to generate a lot of fairly high power cards, so I'm inclined to put it as a good 2-drop. Not quite a 3-drop. After that, we have the Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. Okay, maybe I'm biased against hand buffing, but I think this is crap. It's +2/+2 to a random minion in your hand. No. No. I just don't think it's that good. I think hand buffing is generally really bad. And if you are hand buffing, you're building a deck around it. And hey, look, we just came full circle. So, not good. Ungoro Adapt, basically a 3-drop. There's literally an Ungoro 3-drop that was a 2/2 Adapt. In the worst case scenario, you have a 2/2 that summons 2 1/1s. You have a 2/5 or a 5/2. You have a 3/3 for 2, right? It gets kind of ridiculous, and it's very flexible. 2/2 Divine Shield, 2/2 untargetable, right? You get some really... the effects vary so greatly, and you get to discover what it is, right? That's why it's so powerful, because it's flexible and you get choice in how it's flexible. Which takes us to Knights of the Frozen Throne, which, like everything else with Knights of the Frozen Throne, was absolutely busted. Add a Death Rattle and a random Death Knight card to your hand. It's 2 mana Arthas without the beast tag, of course, because I know we cared so much about that tag. Death Knight cards are so powerful. They are... like, imagine pulling a Frostmourne off of this, right? It's like, oh yeah, I just pulled a 5/3 weapon randomly. A 1 in 25 followed by a 1 in 7. Yeah, I just won the game because of it, though. Or, just effects like that. All the Death Knight cards are very powerful. Even Death Coil. Death Coil could be very dangerous to an unsuspecting opponent, right? Alright. Yeah, we have Kobolds and Catacombs. Recruit a minion that costs... giving it away here. It's garbage. Recruit a minion that costs 2 or less. So, again, recruit requires deck building. You need to build your deck around recruiting, and if you don't, then it's not good. Maybe that's unfair, because you're still just pulling a 2-drop from your deck, or a 1-drop at worst, right? So I'd say it's average, because you're probably relying on that battle cry, too. Now, the Witchwood, Echo and Rush, that's fine. I don't know, it's a good 2-drop, right? So, it's better than it's like Hunting Mastiff combined with the neutral Oracle Echo card, right? But like that extra 1 health over Hunting Mastiff doesn't matter that much, and it doesn't have the beast tag, which is actually significant here. So I'm going to say it's a good 2-drop, not quite a 3-drop. We're kind of running out of space here. They need to print some better or worse cards. All right. And we have the Boomsday Project, the purpose of which it's Omega, right? So if you have 10 mana crystals, it has +5/+5, and it has Taunt by default. So that's above average. That's a good 2-drop. Nothing much to say about it. I mean, if it comes out on 2, it's whatever. It's a Frostwolf Grunt, which is bad, obviously, but if you can hold off on it until 10, yeah, that's okay too. Hopefully you aren't. Maybe that might be an average 2-drop, because like if you're putting this into your deck, you're kind of relying on it to come out on 2, because most of these effects can come out on 2. I don't know. I'm a bit iffy on that one. I'm gonna keep it there though. And lastly, Rastakhan's Rumble. Rush and Overkill. Draw a card. No. Overkill as a mechanic, just like Inspire, is generally not that good. Rush Overkill is good, but it only has 2 attack. I don't think you're going to overkill that many things. Besides, often with Rush, you want to value trade, and this is kind of the opposite, right? You want to just do enough damage to cleave through it, and you don't want to have any excess. So, since the game board has been released, I don't have an image for it yet, but the Scholomance game board effect is Battlecry, add a dual class card to your hand. That's powerful. That's probably on the same level as the Karazhan portals. So we actually don't know what these dual class cards are, but because it's like the theme of the expansion, my assumption is that they're going to be very strong. So it's going to be on the same level as the Generate a Plague. It's going to be on the same level as Generate a Karazhan portal. It's going to be a good 2-drop, potentially a 3-drop. So what's the takeaway here? You have a lot of these average effects and a lot of potentially useless ones, alongside one of the best effects I've ever seen on a 2-drop. And you really want effects that are in this range or higher, right? So the average effect of this card is higher than what I would expect of a 2-drop, right? Most of the cards are not in this tier. You have 6, 11 versus 8, 9, 12, 13, right? You have 11 versus 13. I don't think that is a high enough split to really make it worth it. And that's in Wild. That's overall. Also consider that Wild has a very high power level, and deck lists are already very tight. In Standard, so I had exactly. I have a list I was reading from. I think I did rearrange them, but in my initial listing, I had nothing in Standard that was below a C. There was 1 C. I think I made a couple other things C's in that time. But in Standard, I think this card, between the fact that it has less to compete with and the fact that on average it's better because you got rid of all of the D tier effects. All right, none of these are in Standard. Let me double check. Yeah, none of these are in Standard. I think this card might see some play in Highlander decks that necessarily have that deck restriction where they're just like, yeah, throw it in there, you know. There are a lot of cards in Highlander decks that are just kind of filling space, right? But they're you know, thematically cohesive, but they're mostly just filling space. And I think especially once Scholomance comes out, you'll see it in, because I'd say that generally increases the power level. That is a high B tier. Like I said, it was almost a 3-drop in my book. That sort of like very powerful resource generation. I don't know. I think this has a place in Standard, maybe not so much in Wild. I've been in, I've seen buzzing in the Wild community, people talking about running it. I don't know. I think that there are just so many bad effects in Wild now that it's not worth it. I don't know. I'm not the end-all be-all of this. I rely on you guys for feedback. I need other people to have opinions on this, right? So, just tell me what you think, you know? Make sure you leave very detailed comments about how I'm stupid for overvaluing Knights of the Frozen Throne and saying that hand buffing is bad. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and we'll see more content like this to come. I'm very excited for this release, for this new expansion. All right, see ya.